Welcome to Talking Grit, a Detroit Lions podcast. Talking Grit is brought to you by the Monroe County Reporters, Monroe's top news source for police, fire, and community events.
Depot Street, truck boy intercept.
Follow them on Facebook, and for $2.99 a month, you can become a subscriber and get the news you crave even faster.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Talking Grit. I'm Jason Harwood, and with me is Jacob Litton. We are going to talk about stock up and stock down today. Roster cutoff is on Tuesday, August 27th, so it's coming up rather quickly here. We're recording this on Wednesday night. We're hoping to get this out Thursday, so you're going to have like 4 or 5 days to get your last roster cut down. We got a preseason game in between. Jacob and I are going to go back and forth with players. So we're going to start with stock up, and then we're going to go stock down, and then we have like 3 or 4 roster questions each. We're going to discuss that, and then we'll get into the Honolulu Blitz at the end. But before we start, there's a couple things we want to cover before we get to stock up, stock down. One thing, a lot of people have questions about this wide receiver 3 position and what that truly means. Dan Campbell said that basically Khalif Raymond is wide receiver 3, the third best wide receiver on the team, is essentially the way that I took it. But people keep saying we're still looking for wide receiver 3. What we're really looking for is a position, wide receiver X, the X position. That is the wide receiver that's typically on the line. Amon-Ra St. Brown can play that position, but he's so good in the slot, we want to have him over there sometimes. You want to have, Josh Reynolds was your typical wide receiver X. Galvin Johnson was a wide receiver X. There's someone that's on the line, they're closest to the DB, they're going to get jammed. So that's why, that's what they're looking for, is a bigger body type that can fight through those jams. I just wanted to clear that up for anyone that's wondering, about all the wide receiver talk. Next thing earlier today, Penei Sewell went down with an injury in practice. You want to talk about that a little bit, Jacob?
So basically, we don't have a whole lot of information. The practice wasn't open, to the public. It's preseason. They're not really required to give us too much information about the injury. We, heard that he went down. He was helped off to the side. Trainers, everything took a look at him. Justin Rogers, a beat writer for the Lions, he actually put out a tweet, said that information from inside the building sounds like Penei's good and that we don't have anything to worry about. Still not what you want to hear, that, your top player went down in practice. They kind of use today, most of the starters aren't going to play in the last preseason game. So they use today as kind of ramp up the scrimmage and get them some of that game action that they're missing out on by not playing in the preseason game. So, they are upping the intensity. Not uncommon for injuries to happen like that. So it's encouraging that it sounds like we've avoided anything major.
Penei was able to walk to the sideline himself. Justin Rogers described it as slowly walked back to the locker room, but it wasn't like a cart situation. So right off, that's good that he's not, they're not calling for the cart. And then the text that he tweeted out that he's good. I mean, it's rather cryptic. He's good. But to me, that means he's probably going to be good for week 1, that it's not like a major injury. So
at the same time, we aren't going to hear any sort of confirmation or anything about that for probably at least a week.
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on, because there's no more media sessions before. And maybe someone asked Campbell about it on game day. We might get some information there, because especially if he has a press conference after the game, I'm sure someone's going to ask him how Penei's doing. So we might hear a little bit there, but we all collectively held our breath for a little bit, and it's I think we can breathe again. So take a deep breath.
That's just one of the worst headlines you can see is Lions Penei Sewell injured at practice.
Yeah, especially like the last practice before the last preseason game. Yeah, not ideal, but yep, it's looking like it's going to be okay. So we're going to talk about stock up, stock down. First, we're going to start with stock up. So this is kind of collectively, right now, whose stock is rising, right going into the last preseason game, whose stock is tanking. So we want to talk about that. So I'm going to throw it to you, Jacob. Who's the first player that, you have for stock up?
So the first player I have for stock up, it's somebody that I've already mentioned a few times, but it seems like his stock's even higher than last time we talked about it, and I put Kyle Peko. Defensive tackle, somebody who was brought in for a short-term contract, didn't really have any sort of guarantee. We weren't sure what we were getting out of him. And then, basically, we saw it in person. He's been making an impact in practice. He definitely looks like a difference maker. We are hearing that DJ Reader may not start off the season on the PUP list, so that's encouraging. But I still think that Kyle's earned a depth spot. He's earned a spot on the roster. He's getting a lot of reps with the starters in practice, and he has not played in the preseason games. Now, typically, if you're somebody fighting for a roster spot, they want to see what you can do in the game action. So the fact that he's not been out there in the preseason, I feel like he has locked up a roster spot.
I agree. In the practice report that I read from earlier today, they had a scrimmage in practice, ones versus ones, and Kyle Peko had mentioned it quite a few times, just getting tackles for loss or a sack or just pressure. So he's definitely peaking at the right time, and he might have an additional depth piece, that rotate out with Reader. If he can do, he's basically the Reader replacement until Reader comes back. But like you had mentioned, Jacob, Campbell said that he might be ready for next week. I think it gives a nice insurance policy that, even let's say Reader is back, it's not like he's going to be ready to play 30 snaps a game right out the chute. He hasn't been practicing and all that stuff. So, even if we get him in for 10 snaps and then Peko takes over, that can work too. So I agree with you that, and today's practice report seems like his stock is even rising higher. I'm going to actually go with a player that hasn't played in the preseason, but it was just, as I alluded to earlier with the wide receiver talk, Khalif Raymond. Dan Campbell, basically, they asked him in the press conference, and he's like, yeah, Khalif Raymond is wide receiver 3, which means that, he's going to get plenty of looks in this offense. When I heard Dan Campbell said that, I actually today went through NFL Pro. You can look at, it's a new thing if you have an NFL Plus premium. It's awesome. You could see the all 22 views, and there's just so much data you can look at. I looked at every one of Khalif's receptions from last year. He had 35 receptions on 44 targets he had 489 yards, 1 touchdown last year. I looked at every one of them just to see where they were lining him up and how they were utilizing him. I noticed multiple screenplays where, they want to utilize his speed, especially in space. So I expect that to continue. But there was a lot of turbo motion where he was in motion running across the field and basically getting a head start. And, I expect that to happen as well. So, and then there were times where he lined up as the X and was able to catch passes that way too. So he's a guy that can be used all over the field. I'm excited that he's going to get a better chance this season if he's going to get more looks. But it sounds like Dan Campbell says it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get more snaps. It's just that they might utilize him more in those snaps and have more plays for him is how I took it. He does a lot of special teams work, and so I don't expect, they don't want to tire him out from all that. So I know earlier we had talked and we had mentioned about Khalif Raymond. I think it was in the PFF episode, and you were expecting big things from him. Has your thoughts changed on that at all, or they gotten stronger?
No, definitely. I still feel the same way. I expect Khalif to have a big season. I think we've kind of gotten lost, in the whole wide receiver 3 versus the X wide receiver thing. Ben Johnson saying typically they like a little bit of length. They want a bigger target. That's why we were kind of looking at some of the other receivers that maybe they're going to be taking away snaps from Khalif. He's been a valuable part of the team. Obviously, we don't have to rely on him too much, but I definitely think he's going to have a better season than he did last year. I don't think it's possible for him not to. Really, I mean, we have those targets that we need to spread out. Like you said before, they're maybe not giving him more snaps, but he's going to be getting the ball more than he did before.
It's going to be more opportunities.
Can't say enough positive things about Khalif. Obviously, He's not Calvin Johnson. He's not going to, run a go route and out jump 3 guys to get to the ball.
No, but he's going to create separation, and he'll go over the middle. He's got incredible speed. That's why he's on special teams. So I'm excited for Khalif. He's a hard worker. Who do you got next on your list there, Jacob?
All right, next on Stock Up, I have safety Brandon Joseph. So this is somebody else that kind of stood out in person when we were watching, and I think that this is translated to the preseason game as well. So, the practice reports are that he's making an impact in practice. He's been making plays in the preseason too. I think he led the team in tackles last week. He got a pick. He forced a fumble last week. He is showing that he has value on special teams. And I really think, if the safety position comes down to, you've got Branch, you have Iffy, you have Kirby. Those three are locks. But then when you're looking at another, if they're going to keep only 4, you've got CJ Moore or Brandon Joseph. And if Brandon Joseph is, outplaying him, if he can actually play the safety position better than CJ can, I think you have to keep Brandon Joseph. And I really think he's played his way up to a roster spot.
Yep. He's played out, and that's good. He's just been consistent, it seems to me. He had the interception, but he's not making just like 1 or 2 splash plays, and that's why he's getting on there. It just seems like he's consistent, and that's what the Lions want. He's good on special teams, and I think he's got a pretty good shot at making the roster.
He spent last season with us as well. He didn't make the team right away. I believe he was practice squad most of the time. He still played in a couple games. Just when I look at those two between him and CJ Moore, I don't know that we're going to have room to keep both of them. I think ideally you would, just because of CJ's special teams value. But if you can only keep one, I definitely think that Brandon shows more out of the safety position.
Yeah, I mean, CJ Moore is probably the better special teams player.
Right.
But Dave Fitt made the point that, the time of making this team as only a special teams player is probably over, outside of your specialist. You could be right on the money there with Brandon Joseph. He might, just because he's playing better safety, he might have the inside track on getting that roster spot. Or Lions could keep them both. We'll see how that goes.
Right.
All right. The next player that I'm going to talk about is Sione Vaki. We talked about him in the recap. I'm thinking this is going to be like similar to almost how we had used Jahmyr Gibbs last year, where it's like we didn't really see him very much at the beginning of the year. And we would see some, a couple plays here and there. And then it took a little while for the Lions to have confidence in him, for Jahmyr Gibbs to have confidence. And I think the same thing with Vaki, although I think it may take Vaki even longer just because Vaki hasn't played the running back position very much in college. So he's learning a new position, but he's already dangerous as a pass catcher. And when I see Vaki, the player, someone mentioned this the other day. I don't know what article I read, and it was in there. It was like Theo Riddick. And that's what I see Vaki as, like Theo Riddick, just dangerous out of the backfield, will make a guy miss. I loved when Theo was on the team, and he wasn't that dynamic of a runner. I think Vaki probably has the potential to be a better runner than him, but it's just going to take time to develop that. He's game day ready for special teams. I think he might be on the kickoff return. The question is can he block in pass protection, and can he run between the tackles? Those are the two things that he's probably got to work on the most. Anything you want to add on Vaki?
Yeah, no, I think you were spot on with the Theo Riddick comparison. Definitely in that last preseason game, he showed flashes of that. What's interesting about him is when we first drafted him, his official position is running back / safety, and we didn't really even know where we going to put him. What are we putting him at? And, when we find out he's playing running back, there's no expectations for him. Like he, is out, he's learning. We're just trying to see what we have. And I think he right away has been exceeding expectations. And you're right. Like what we've seen so far is actually playing towards actually getting playing time this year, which we didn't really even think with the running backs on the roster was even going to be possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good problem to have, right? We have too many weapons, but they're going to train him, and they're hoping to have maybe he replaces Montgomery in a few years of Montgomery's contract's done. Dan Campbell today says he's the best singer on the team.
Did you hear him sing?
I did not hear him sing.
You should listen to him sing, though. It's on there. He sounds like a combination of Fergie and Jesus.
When does he sing?
It was I didn't see like the inside the they usually do where they're inside the meeting room or whatever, like when Hutch did it. I didn't see that, but they had the media talking to him and he just saying something real quick there. I was like, okay, I didn't expect him to have that kind of voice.
Was that in the press conference today?
Yes, yeah. Well, it was after practice, but yeah. Look it up. He's got a good voice.
Yeah, I didn't.
Doesn't make him a good football player,
but well, he is a good football player, but not because of the voice. So.
Right. No, but yeah, I don't anticipate seeing him very much this year. But what we've seen so far, if he keeps on that trajectory, there's a chance he can throw him in a couple snaps and try to see what we can do. Especially if he's involved in special teams, then he's going to be active every week.
Who's your next on your list there?
All right. So next on my list, I have Isaiah Williams. So undrafted wide receiver Isaiah Williams on my stock up list. And really, that's just because he's the only receiver who's shown us anything at all. He's been capitalizing on his opportunities. In practice, I know he's been kind of up and down. But in the preseason, really every chance he's getting, he's been making the most of it. He had the game, with the downpours. He still comes up leading the team with, I think, 4 catches, like 30 yards. Last week, the game against the Chiefs, he led 6 catches, 71 yards. He is making decent returns. I mean, he's making an impact on these games. He's doing what Fountain and what DPJ were not able to do. We just need to see something out of these guys. It's worth mentioning, I guess, the biggest issue that we have right now with Isaiah Williams is this whole X versus YZ receiver position. Because, if we do keep Isaiah versus one of the other big guys, he's not a traditional X receiver playing on the outside. He's pretty much solely in the slot. And, we do have Amon-Ra spends a lot of time in there and Khalif. So if we keep him, do we have to move him around as much? How do we make that work? I don't know for sure that he has a roster spot locked up just yet, but I do think what we've seen so far puts him on the right track, and I think his stock is definitely going up.
Yep. I mean, he's had 12 total targets in the preseason. Like you said, he's totaled 10 for 106. He's, in a room they're looking for consistency, he's been consistently getting yards. You could argue that in the first game, 4 for 35. On the surface, doesn't sound good, but it was better than every other wide receiver. There was poor quarterback play that game, and just the weather was horrendous, as we talked about. So the expectations have to be lowered in that game as far as, pass catching. He had a very nice return in the last game, too, on special teams that set up that game-winning field goal at the end. He did have, I guess you call it a fumble. He was trying to do too much and basically held the ball way too far outside of his body. So, I mean, that's not good, but he did have the nice return to make up for that at the end. Of all the wide receivers, yes, he looked good. The problem is that he is not what they're looking for in that X position, and what he can do, Khalif and Amon-Ra can already do better. So outside of an injury, but you get an injury to one of those two guys, you got someone that maybe you could bring up from a practice squad position if that's where he goes. But
I do think what we've seen from him so far, if it's not enough for him to make the team, I think he's probably shown enough where he's going to get a chance elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. He might get a shot at another team, but he definitely gets a shot at the practice squad. There's not many players that get picked up, and especially an undrafted rookie. I don't know if they're going to, how much he's on other teams' radar. He doesn't have any touchdowns. He did drop one last game, too. I wouldn't even see him being picked up by any other team, to be honest with you. Just with other people that are going to be cut there, there's going to be probably some bigger names. So I think he could probably slide through the practice squad. I'm going to talk about my next general category is just the offensive line reserves in general. A couple players I'll shout out, but the offensive line in the last game the reserves played much better than the first game. And especially in the first couple series, they're playing top Kansas City defenders. They held them in check, did not allow a lot of pressure. They had the only time that they were getting pressure is when basically Sudfeld was holding the ball too long, essentially not getting rid of the ball quick enough. So, I'm pretty encouraged by that. Players I will mention is Kingsley Iguaquin. He is a center. We already have Frank, right? But they're trying him out. They started trying him out this week at guard, just to see if he has that, if he can handle that. And if he can open up playing all 3 inside positions on the offensive line, that's going to give him a better shot at making the roster. whether he makes it right out the gate or goes on a practice squad, I'm not sure. But Michael Neese was playing more guard, but Michael Neese started the center today, and then they moved Kingsley to the guard. They kind of flip-flop positions, mostly just to see what versatility they have between these two guys, because those are two guys that might be fighting for one roster spot. So they're probably trying to see who can, play all three inside positions. So, and the other guy I'll mention is, our fourth round draft pick, Manu. Yeah, there was a awesome video put out by Nick Baumgartner today. I didn't have a chance to mention it to you earlier, Jacob, but it's like a 20-minute, just breakdown on Giovanni Manu's preseason game. Nick Baumgartner works for The Athletic, and it was really, he went into a lot of detail. He's actually ahead of where you thought he would be at this point, but there's a lot of times where he's standing too tall and his hand placement is kind of all over the place. But he's able to get into position, especially in pass blocking. Nick was impressed with that ability. It's just that fact that he didn't get low enough, and people are able to get a little bit more leverage on him because he's not getting low enough. But his extreme length helps him overcome some of his technique shortcomings right now, which, you're hoping a year or two and Frank Fraley's going to get the technique down, and then you got this awesome frame with good technique and what kind of, offensive lineman he can turn into.
Exactly. Like the physical traits are there. There's not a doubt about that. It's just fine-tuning, the actual technique, which was always the plan, really, right? I mean, we knew what it was when we drafted him.
Yeah, that's no surprise. You basically have a Broderick Martin, type player, just going to be active on your team all year, but he probably will not be active on game day, so he'll probably be, a healthy scratch. But, you're hoping in 2 or 3 years, you've got, a Dan Skipper replacement where he's your tackle. He's your number one tackle off the bench.
I agree 100% about the offensive line. Especially you've got some of these guys who are trying to move around, see if they can play multiple positions, and, whoever proves that they know the positions the best and has the best, really the best impact, the practices are over, right? So they've got the preseason game to show out, and that's it. Realistically, they're fighting for offensive line spots. You probably are going to be put on the practice squad for the people that don't make the roster. So, it's not like the chance is gone, but I think it's encouraging what we've seen on the offensive line.
I agree. Yep. We don't want any of our starters being hurt, but that seems to happen every year. And you got to have people ready to play behind them. So we'll see. Any other players on your stock up list that you wanted to talk about?
So the last person I have on my list is kind of, I guess, just an honorable mention, just because I already thought pretty highly of him before, but that's Amik Robertson. We knew what type of player that he was coming in. We knew that he was definitely wasn't going to go down quietly. He was going to be fighting for a position, and he's definitely done that in practice and in the games. He's definitely bringing the intensity. I really like what I see out of Amik, and I definitely like the idea of him being our starting nickel corner.
Awesome player. I love his attitude. He's going to fit in so well with the Lions. So can't wait to see him, when the season starts. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, he's had a couple of hiccups. I know he gave up a touchdown and everything, but that's also, who knows if that's him learning the nickel spot or if there was some sort of blown coverage or, some miscommunication there, because obviously he's out there with some of the second and third team guys, so I'm not worried about that.
I'm not worried about that either. In practice today, it sounds like the defense outshined the offense in the scrimmage, and I have no worries about our offense at all performing at a high level this year. Will they have troubles here and there? Yeah, all offenses do, but if our defense is able to get consistent pressure like they were getting today, that speaks very well for our defense. A couple more players I'll answer, just like honorable mention players. Hendon Hooker, he looked significantly better in the second game than he did in the first game. He seemed like he was doing his reads more. Maybe it seemed like he had more time in the second game. I was relieved that he wasn't like looking at his primary read and then just taking off. It seemed like he really wanted to pass the ball, and running was like the last ditch option. And even on his touchdown run, that was like he went through all his reads and then he took off and scored. So I love that he has that ability. I'm not saying we replace Jared Goff, but it is nice to have a backup with that ability. Things break down, he can use that.
Obviously, it's the first time we're actually getting to see him. I feel the same way. I'm encouraged by the fact that he's not just tucking and running. He is going through his reads. He's, pass first. And I think that's the problem, is that there's so many fans that want that running mobile quarterback. We want to try to get the ball to our receivers down the field. We don't want you to drop back and then run and gain 4 or 5 yards, whatever it may be. That's not what we're wanting. That's not the way the offense runs. So yeah, Hendon has played very well. Definitely think the stock's up for him too.
Yeah, well, I mean, you talk about, running, whatever. I mean, he ran a lot in the first game and then he gets out with a concussion. So that's your risk, right? I'm not saying he's going to get a concussion every time he runs, but that's your risk. The more you run, the more contact you take, the higher risk that you're not going to be playing there. And if he's going to be a backup quarterback, we can't, he's got to really be careful. He's got to be able to use his legs just sparingly and when absolutely needed, and then slide.
Yeah, get down.
Yep. Listen to your mom and then slide. All right. Now we can get to like kind of the depressing part of it, the stock down. So Jacob and I have again picked some players that we want to talk about. I'm going to throw it to you first, Jacob. Who is first on your stock down list?
Well, we're going to kind of swing around from the Hendon Hooker thing, and the stock down I have is on Nate Sudfeld. Basically, he just hasn't looked good in any of his opportunities in the preseason games. I know in the practices he has shown, some flashes. I would say overall we've seen more bad than good. And especially, the first game, he's not moving the ball. He makes that really bad interception. And then Hendon Hooker comes in and the offense starts moving down the field. That may just be because Hendon obviously is more mobile and can run, but I just don't think that Nate didn't do himself any favors in the preseason. Obviously, we would have hoped that he has shown a little bit more and had an actual legitimate battle for the backup spot. And right now, I don't think that he's done that. Based on practice, I think that he still is going to make the team. If he does start the season as the quarterback too, I don't think he's got a very good hold on it.
Yeah, he's not going to be long for that position. It's basically holding it until Hendon, they feel that Hendon can run the offense. That's where I'm at with Nate. He did play better in the second game. I mean, he had 196 yards in the first half. But when he misses a receiver, he misses bad. And then he's also holding the ball too long.
Yeah, consistently holding it too long.
Just make your read and get it to him. Now, we can always make the argument he's playing with less talent. But the defense is also less talented that he's playing.
On his touchdown throw, though, I mean, it's a cross over the middle. A lot of that was the run after the catch. It wasn't really like it was a magnificent throw.
No, it did. I don't know what happened there. It looked like the receivers were almost crossing, so I don't know if they were both meant to do that, but it just kind of worked out for Lions. It was almost like a pick play, and then, once Caden Davis was in the open field, he's too fast. They weren't going to catch him. So.
Right.
But, yeah, you're right. Good call on that. Player that I'm going to talk about is a player that, we've talked about a lot on this podcast, and a lot of people are talking about him, is James Houston. He was injured last week, didn't play. He's trying to get him in the Sam role. They've reduced his role recently, which, might just limit his reps or how many snaps he would get in a game if they can't trust him, on a run play. If they can't trust him to back up into coverage, he's only going to be on 3rd and long or a 2nd and very long. His size isn't big enough to handle the run, to set an edge properly. You go back to 2 years ago and, taking the league by storm, getting 8 sacks in essentially half a season. It seems like there's plenty to work with there, but he just really hasn't shown it. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see him at all. I was hoping we would see him on Saturday. They were going to move him to just defensive end. So maybe we would have just saw him in some pressure situations, but we haven't got to see that. So, I feel bad because he's so promising, and maybe the expectations are just too high for him just because he came out of the gate and then We kind of basically lost all of last year. What's your thoughts on James Houston at this point?
Yeah, I have him trending down as well. At the beginning of the preseason, I really thought that he was going to make the team. And now, because of the injuries, because of the limited practice time and everything, it's a 50-50 toss-up for me about whether he makes it or not. It doesn't help that, they did try having him learn that SAM position, and they really kind of just had to abandon it just because it just wasn't working. He wasn't able to learn it, and I don't know if that's just like, mentally he's just not able to get down where he's supposed to be and be reliable, or if it's a physical thing, he's just not big enough to do everything that he has to do outside of rushing the quarterback. We know he can rush the quarterback, but, is he going to do that consistently enough that's going to warrant him having that roster spot? I really don't know. I feel like it's trending the wrong way for him right now. And him being hurt is not helping because, he's missing those chances to prove himself.
One thing that may, end up being in Houston's favor as far as making the roster is he's not going to be someone that you're going to be able to stash on the practice squad. There's going to be another team that will take a chance on him if he were to get cut. But I could make him a trade candidate, like a low-level trade candidate where we swap him for another player or a late, I'm thinking 6th or 7th round pick at best. It's as opposed to just cutting him. Another team, especially if they're lower on the waiver wire, they might not be able to get a shot at James Houston. They might be able to, give him a draft pick so that, they don't have to worry about the waiver wire process. And then it gives Brad Holmes, another draft pick to see if he can do work his magic on.
Right? That's a possibility. Like you mentioned, what he put on paper with those 8 sacks that 1 year, teams really need pass rush help. He hasn't been able to replicate that here, but that doesn't mean that somebody else isn't willing to take a chance on him that has the roster spot that can do it.
Yeah, or the defensive scheme to allow that to happen too. Who's the next player on your stock down list, Jacob?
So I kind of have a combination here in my stock down, and that's going to be for Doris Fountain and Donovan Peoples-Jones. That's just, we talked about it throughout every week, what we were hoping to see. We really wanted to see them unleashed. We wanted to see, especially Doris, though, just because of how he did in practice when they were giving him the reps with the ones. He actually was catching the ball. He was making an impact. He looked really good. He looked like he was going to slot in and do what Josh Reynolds did. And, we thought we might really be onto something. And then the games come and you don't really see much of anything in the game. We talked about the weather and everything for the first game. Well, then the drops start happening in practice. Then he's not able to really create the separation and stuff that he was doing before. And, for Donovan Peoples-Jones, he kind of had to take a back seat for that first couple weeks. Well, then DPJ kind of gets that chance to go with the ones and kind of flip-flop. They're both getting shots, and it's almost like Dan Campbell's just begging one of these guys, show us something. Give us something that shows that you belong here and that you're going to step in and be that guy. And they both had those chances, and they have not done anything with it. It's just been very discouraging. And this really comes down to, it comes down to this preseason game, I feel like. It's, they're not both going to make the roster. I feel like it's more likely that neither of them makes the roster. But I think that Donovan Peoples-Jones probably has the upper hand just because he's been here longer. They've got to do something in this game. This is probably the most interesting thing for me. Before it was just interesting because it was the thought of it. Like, let's see what we have. Now I think it's the most interesting because this is literally their jobs are on the line.
Yeah, they both have been disappointing. They were actually both on my list too. Drew's found, like you said, the drops, happening. And it feels like as the pressure got ramped up and he didn't produce in the first game that he got, too much pressure and it's just not showing enough in practice anymore. Along with not showing in the game. But it's too bad because he has the ideal size and athletic ability that you want in that position. Can go up can high point a ball, is big and strong and can, fight through a jam or whatever. But it hasn't shown in the game so far. He's caught 2 passes for 15 yards and 6 targets. And, that's for both preseason games. So it's not good. DPJ, same thing. He's not getting the separation that he needs. He is a big body. The thing that he has that Doris found is that DPJ's done it in this league before. So I think he's got more of a history. So I think if you had to choose out of the two, Lions are going to choose DPJ just because they got more of a track record with him. One thing I did not like, though, on one of Aki's runs, DPJ did not block downfield at all. And I think the Lions, if you know the Lions at all, they expect their wide receivers to block all the way down the field. So whether DPJ gave up or it's not a good look for him, that'll get you in the doghouse really fast. I think what Jameson said, that no block, no rock, is what Ben Johnson says.
Right.
So, that
J-Mo's
that
blocking
speaks to that.
downfield.
I only have one more player on my list because we kind of just hit on, Darius Fountain and DPJ were on my list. Mine is Stephen Gilmore. We kept him on the roster all of last year. Same thing like Broderick Martin, where we were afraid we were going to lose him to try to in the practice squad, so we kept him on the roster. He didn't get very much playing time, but he hasn't really shown that much, and our cornerback depth is much deeper than it was last year. So I don't know. He may be able to get on the practice squad. I'm not sure, but because he hasn't really shown that much in the games for another team to really want to latch on to him. So I don't know. I'm kind of disappointed with Stephen Gilmore. I was hoping a step forward would happen, but it just hasn't shown in games. So it's kind of disappointing.
I agree. We have a really crowded cornerback room now, obviously, but the opportunities he's been given, he gave up a really bad touchdown. I haven't really heard too much about practice, positive or negative towards him, which, in this, no news is not good news. You want to stand out, and, you can't just be complacent, I guess. He was here last year. You would hope that he's taken a step up, especially now that we've got the young corners trying to light a fire up underneath him too, and he really is not making much of an impact at all. And I kind of feel like this is one of the ones we're going to cut. I do think that he probably will go someplace else.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it just depends on, what other teams view him, and maybe he wants to not even be on our practice squad and get a chance to play on another team if he views our depth as deep. That brings us to the conclusion of stock up and stock down. Jacob and I prepared like 3 questions each. We're going to ask about roster construction. So we're going to go back and forth on these questions, and then we'll see where that leads. And then just so everyone knows, this weekend, we're going to do a roster breakdown. We're going to have that episode released Monday morning about our roster predictions, because Tuesday, like I said, is cutoff day. And then after Tuesday, then Wednesday, they could start building their practice squad. So we might have a reaction to that, Wednesday or Thursday next week. So expect 2 pods next week. And then along with the game recap on Sunday for the preseason game. So we plan on releasing that Sunday morning sometime. Won't be as early as usual because I think, I don't know, Jacob and I might not be able to do the record till Sunday morning. So just so you know, that's coming up. But anyways, let's get to our questions here. What's your first question?
Okay, so it kind of leads into what we were finishing off on before about the wide receivers. Do you think that we keep 5 wide receivers out of the ones that we have right now? Or do you think we only keep 4 and then we look to sign elsewhere?
Yeah, that's actually was my second question, is the wide receiver 3 on the roster right now. So that's good, because I figured we would kind of duplicate, but I like your question. So you're going to have Amon-Ra, Khalif, and Jameson obviously as the 3. I think it's going to be DPJ in there 4, and then I don't know who else we're going to keep on there. My feeling is that they're going to maybe add outside the organization, just to see who's cut. I don't know if we're going to make any trades or anything like that, but it also concerns me because it takes a while for Goff to work with a wide receiver, it seems like. So if it's someone that he's not, used to, then, who knows how long it's going to take. I know Robert Woods may be out there, but Robert Woods is getting older, and I'm not excited about that. That proposition. So what's your thoughts? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, I go back and forth on this because I feel like they are going to try to look elsewhere just because of what we've seen so far. I like Isaiah Williams. It would be nice if we could find the spot for him and keep him. I just don't know how. I guess we'll see in the preseason game. I don't see how it's going to happen. I think that most likely we'll keep 4. Obviously, the Amon-Ra, J-Mo, Khalif, those are all guaranteed. We'll keep 1 more. Most likely DPJ. Could be Isaiah. Could be Doris. I guess we'll see. But I think we're probably going to keep 4, and I think we're going to look elsewhere. If we do keep 5, I think that they probably wide receiver 4 and 5 are probably going to be known like you're on the line right now. Like you've got to play, you got to earn your spot every single day. Your job is not guaranteed for you.
Yep, they'll have to continue to play. And, it just depends on who gets cut out there. I mean, there's always a surprise cut here or there. And with the Lions having as strong a roster as they want, they're in the position to sign those experienced players that are chasing, a winning organization, which it's weird to say that. Lions haven't been in that position forever as a fan. So we're kind of in that spot where, okay, we can sign this player and they're going to take like a discounted deal because, we're going to be able to get them in there and chance to compete for playoffs and, even greater. So, all right. My first question for you, Jacob, is how many QBs will be on the active roster in week 1?
That's a tough question, but I think there's going to be 3. I think that you have to have Sudfeld and Hooker. I don't know that either one of them is capable. I don't think they've created that separation yet. We obviously can't cut Hooker. You can't do anything with him. If you cut Sudfeld and have to put him on the practice squad and keep him as inactive, do we trust Hooker, to take the reins of the offense if something happens to Goff? I don't know that you do. How do you feel about that one, though?
Yeah, I think you're going to start out. The question is, when do they cut Sudfeld loose? That's my question throughout the season, because my thinking is going to be the bye week's week 5. So at week 5, I think, is when you're going to kind of know what you got in Hooker. And then from that point forward, they might cut Sudfeld. Some of our listeners might say, you can have a third quarterback on the roster that you elevate. So let's do that with Nate Sudfeld. Let's elevate him on game day. We'll cut him. He won't take a roster spot. He can go on the practice squad because no one else is going to pick him up and elevate him. The problem with that is that right now, if you don't trust Hendon as your number 2 and you want Sudfeld to come in, Sudfeld can't come in as your emergency person that you brought up can only come in if your first two quarterbacks get hurt. And let's say that Goff's out, Hendon gets hurt, you can bring Sudfeld in at that point. But if Hendon is able to come back in the game, then you have to immediately take Sudfeld out and then put Hooker back in. So if you don't trust Hendon to be the number 2, then you can't use Sudfeld as he's on the practice squad, so we can just put him in the game. Can't do that. And like you said, Jacob, you can't cut Hendon because he's never going to make through the waiver. Someone else is going to sign him. So you have to keep Hendon on your roster. You're probably going to have to keep Nate if you don't trust Hendon at this point at number 2.
Ideally, Hendon would be ready right now and you could stash Sudfeld on the practice squad and then you can use that roster spot for a different position. I just don't think that we're there yet. Good point about the emergency quarterback thing, though. Okay, next one. As it stands right now, do you think Bates is the kicker, or do you think we still look to try to sign a different kicker after cuts?
This is a situation where you're looking at my Google Notes because that is actually one of my questions. My feeling is that, especially after the last preseason game, Bates is going to be the kicker week 1. However, I feel the Lions will have a quick trigger if he's not being consistent. And, I don't think they're going to just ride throughout the season with him if he's not able to show it during the game. Ironically, he's hitting the longer kicks, but he missed another extra point in practice today. So, I don't know. Maybe we need to move the extra point back. I don't know what's going on.
Snap the ball further back?
Yeah, just keep doing false start penalties until we get back to where we feel comfortable. Yeah, exactly.
Until it's a 60-yarder.
Yep. And the other team will keep declining it, but it's one of those things that I don't know if his focus is off or what.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think that, they probably have kind of a shorter leash with him, but we haven't brought anybody else in here to compete. Just even if like Riley Patterson gets cut or we have somebody, that we know that's available, I still think that they keep Bates and let Bates be the guy. And, for what it's worth, these field goals that he's kicking right now are all outdoors. And we only have to play outdoors 3 times. I know the weather hasn't been much of a factor, but I know it was kind of windy out today when he missed the extra point. He's been clutch inside Ford Field for the Michigan Panthers. So, hopefully that translates to the regular season for us. I do think if he has one of those games where he misses 2 extra points and a field goal, he might be cut loose right away. I don't know. I don't know how, we have too good of a team to lose in that way.
I agree. And so, it'd be a shame for Brad Holmes to like have so much momentum with his drafts and, the trades that he's had this year and then, free agents that he's picked up and then derailed by, this kicker situation. That would be a shame.
Right.
But he's going to be on the hot seat because he'll have to answer for that if Bates isn't the answer. Why did they do this? It might be offset by Dan Campbell going for it more on 4th down, but you don't want to be in a situation where you don't trust the kicker, right? You're going for it solely on that. I want to go for it on 4th down if that's the best decision for the team to, put him in a position to win. I don't want it to be like, I know, his kicker's 50-50. I don't, we better go for it. And then you're stuck in that. Because teams will play, then they will guard you different on 3rd down if they know you're going to go for it on 4th down, and you don't get those surprise runs and pick up 3 or 4 yards, and then all of a sudden it's 4th and 3 instead of 4th and 7, which is a lot tougher to get.
I think teams know now. Like anytime we're past the 50, we're at risk to go for it on 4th down.
Yeah, and I like putting pressure on teams to make them have the tough decisions and let them make a mistake, and because Dan knows what he's going to do. It's very apparent that, he's not, he's, even when, like you say, he's doing it with emotion, like maybe in the Dallas game where they went for it on 2, but he knew they were going for 2 the whole time when they went down there. He told Jared Goff at the start of the thing, it's like, we're going to go down and score a touchdown and we're going to get the 2-point conversion. He knows in his head he's got a good plan. It just depends on distance situations and all that plays into it. But Dan has a pretty good idea and pretty good feel for his team. And, sounds like he has a consistent message. My next question is, will Parker Hesse make the team as a backup tight end and possibly fullback?
As of right now, I'm going to say no. It's a very interesting prospect, and I guess that kind of, goes with the quarterback and some of the other positions about, how many guys are we keeping here or there? Do we have room for somebody like that? Because, we have utilized other people at fullback before. I know Aleem was trying out at fullback, Rodrigo. We've had other people trying that position out. I don't think that he makes enough of an impact right now to warrant a roster spot. Do you feel like he does? What way are you leaning?
I'm leaning towards maybe. No, that's kind of wishy-washy. No, I think that he might make it. Just the way I've seen him line up in practice. He's been on the fullback as 1st and 2nd team. Now, complicated, you mentioned Malcolm Rodriguez. He's been out with an injury. So, maybe Malcolm's doing that in practice instead of Parker, and Malcolm's just not available. So I don't know. But the fact that Parker can do it is encouraging, especially when we get those jumbo goal line sets. He's a big body, tight end. Also the kickoff rule has changed, so he might be out there on kickoff. So I could see a path to a roster spot. It's just when I finally get down and break down each roster spot, then I'll know. But that's, to hold a 3rd or 4th tight end, are they going to hold Zylstra or Mitchell? That's tough. I mean, probably going to be at the expense of 1 or 2 or both of those guys if they keep Parker. So. It's a good question. I'm leaning probably to no, but it's possible. It depends. James Mitchell's my wild card.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. You would have to count on keeping 4 tight ends because you already know about Laporta and Brock Wright. And then, it's really Zylstra or Mitchell. Are they going to be the 3rd, or do they keep 4 and keep both of them? I don't think that they do, but I mean, so if you're going to try to make room for Hesse, then one of them's got to go.
Yep. So, all right, let's get ready for the Honolulu Blitz.
It's time for the Honolulu Blitz.
Jacob, who leads the Lions in rushing in this preseason?
In this preseason?
Yeah, the 2 games so far.
Zonovan Knight?
Ooh, that's close. He's 2nd. He's got 48 yards. Vaki is 1st with 51 yards. So really close. But,
right?
Yeah.
I knew Vaki made more of an impact in the passing game, but
he had 29 yards in the first game. He only had 22 in the second. But Knight didn't do very well in the first game.
No,
but he had a better second game, rushing wise. All right. So we talked, in our way back in our first episode, Joey Harrington was your quarterback for the Lions when he first started. So how many career touchdowns did Joey Harrington have? Not just with the Lions, but his full career, his 6-year career.
I'm going to say 28.
28, you're way low. He had 79 touchdowns, actually.
79 touchdowns over 6 years. Didn't feel like it. How many of those were at the Lions? Do you have the breakdown?
I do. I wrote down 60 with the Lions. Just as a bonus question, how many interceptions do you think he threw in his career?
So he threw 70 touchdowns?
79 touchdowns.
79 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I'll say 90 interceptions.
A little high, but 85, yeah. So more interceptions than
close.
touchdowns.
Right.
Yeah, you were right on there.
When you're 10 years old watching your quarterback suck, it didn't feel like he was, scoring many touchdowns.
You weren't getting very many touchdowns. Well,
yeah.
The funny thing about that is like 70 of those career touchdowns were in that Thanksgiving Day game against the Lions when he was with Miami. That's what it felt like.
Right.
All right.
Is this real life? How is he doing it? Yeah.
Exactly. All right. My third and final question is this Saturday when the Lions play the Steelers in the preseason game, how long, say Hendon Hooker starts, how long do you think they're going to leave him play?
I hope he plays the entire first half. I think he should play the entire first half, and then, you give it over to Sudfeld.
Yeah, I'm hoping that they give him a little bit longer. I'm hoping that they give him, even into the third quarter or whatever, because, at this point, you're trying to see if Hooker can do the offense, right? I mean, see if he can be your backup. Because if he could prove like that he's good enough, and I don't know if he can do that in a preseason game. I don't know if they'll use that as the end all be all. But say he has a really good grasp of the offense, he looks good. That's a roster spot that you can gain, right? If you feel that. So I'm hoping that he gets into the third quarter.
I wouldn't be opposed, honestly, to having him play the whole game. We don't need to see any more out of Sudfeld, really. I mean, that's not the question mark that we have.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're Lions and you want to get, Sudfeld a little more extra snaps. If you think he's going to be number 2, you want to get him some snaps just so that if, he has to come in. But I'm hoping that he, goes.
Minimum should be the whole first half.
Yeah.
This one's kind of a true or false. Did Dan Campbell ever win a Super Bowl as a player?
He did. Yes, he did. Was it the Giants, right? He won with the Giants. Was he on the team that beat Brady? I don't know.
This is perfect because it's a trick question. So you can be right either way, but you're also kind of wrong either way. So
yeah.
But you're really wrong now. So it was with the Saints.
Oh.
So his last season with the Saints, he was on injured reserve. So he technically is credited with, the Super Bowl win because he was on that team. But he was on injured reserve when they won, and he did not receive a ring. But no, he didn't win any of those years with the Giants.
Oh, man. I know that, well, I think in that one press conference, he said they had a really good team, and then they were kind of complacent, and then, they didn't play very well the following year. So, yep, that rings true. All right. You got me in your trick questions.
I know. Hey, I said it either way. You could have been right either way and wrong either way. You're the one that mentioned the Giants and made yourself really wrong, so...
I know.
No, that was a great guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was the only player last year besides Jared Goff to attempt a pass for us?
Feel like it was wide receiver. Who would it have been?
It was towards the end of the year.
Who was it? I feel like Amon-Ra, but I'm wrong. So tell me.
It was on a fake punt.
Oh. Who was that? I don't know. Who was it?
It was Jalen Reeves-Maybin. So the fake punt against the Cowboys, he had a 31-yard pass to Dorsey. And that actually was the only pass attempt by somebody other than Goff last year.
Wow. All right.
So that was cool, right?
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, good for JRM, man. That's awesome.
All right. Last one is an opinion question. What are your top 3 favorite sitcoms?
Ooh. Of all time?
Yeah, we'll go all time.
Yeah.
So you can see how old you are.
Yeah, no. Well, Seinfeld's number 1. Whew. man, on the spot. Oh, man. Parks and Rec and probably The Office, I would say. Those are the three, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen The Office.
Yeah. Yeah. Parks and Rec is awesome. If you like The Office, you like Parks and Rec. And then, yeah, Seinfeld is, that's older than you. And probably you won't get some of the references, but yeah, that was a good show.
Yeah. That's good, though.
So,
good answers.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
no black and white shows.
No, the Munsters, man. I was about to say the Munsters, but then I thought, you won't say that. And then you'll be like, well, what about the Addams Family? And then say that. And, there's Cheers and all these old shows in the 80s. You wouldn't have got those references either.
What's Cheers?
You don't know what Cheers is? Oh,
I'm just kidding with you.
No, it's
I like to make you feel older than you are, so.
I know. I just feel sorry for you if you didn't know that about Cheers, because that's a great guy.
I've never watched it, but I know what it is.
It actually is still pretty funny. I rewatched it recently, and yeah, it's still
Bust
funny.
out your VHS tapes.
I did. I got them out. I was like, pull the dust off the VCR. All these TVs don't have coaxial cables anymore, so I don't know. I didn't even know how to hook it up. And then
turn it to channel. You got to dial to channel 3.
Yeah, I did. UHF or VHF, and then my son's like, it's on Peacock, right? And I'm like, what's Peacock? I don't understand. Do we have that channel? He's like, well, you have it for football. And I said, oh, yes, that's correct.
Put on your bifocals and find it.
Put on my bifocals. Here, Sonny, where's the remote? Can you hit the button, please? No. All right. Yep, there you're back. You're back. You're back into making fun of me. Then I'm old, so I like
dig
it.
a little bit.
Yep. All right, man. Well, this is fun. It's going to lead us into a good preseason game. Looking forward to it. Anything you're specifically looking for on Saturday?
No, honestly, just Hendon Hooker, trying to see these receivers, try to see what we got. It's the last chance for a lot of these guys. So,
yep.
I mean, looking in depth, it should be a good game.
Yeah, let's hope we don't lose anybody to injury. And then I want to see Hendon play, and I'm hoping he plays pretty well, and maybe one of these receivers shows out. We'll see. But then Tuesday is the dreaded day where countdown happens, and then we get our roster and get to look forward to the Rams in this season. So looking forward to all that. So, all right, for Jacob, I'm Jason. Go Lions.